Okay, so I just got back from watching Matt Walsh's Am I a Racist? And first impressions, there were a number of times throughout the film where I literally laughed out loud, and I wasn't expecting that. This film was genuinely funny, but in a very sad way. One of the things that stuck out to me first when watching this film was he meets a so-called anti-racist activist named Kate Slater. She starts something called the Roadmap to Anti-Racism or some nonsense like this. Kate Slater says to Matt Walsh that you need to do the work. He asked her, well, what does it mean to do the work? Like, what does that mean? And her response was very fascinating to me. She says that for white people, to do the work is to reallocate your resources and your privileges to balance out societal equity or some nonsense like this. Folks, the lady was advocating for all-out socialism, from each according to one's ability to each according to one's need. You kind of get the sense that this is exactly what all of these so-called anti-racist activists are in pursuit of. That is in fact what they are advocating for. Marxism, which is very fascinating because one of the things that Matt exposes in his own way is that they're doing this while raking in cash along the way. Another thing that I really liked about the film is how Matt Walsh really shines in his ability to draw out the absurdity in a lot of what these folks believe, a lot of what they advocate for. And he does it simply by asking them questions. And you begin to understand that when it comes to these so-called intellectuals, these pseudo-intellectuals, these college-educated nincompoops, is that they're not used to having their ideas challenged. In the beginning of the film, Matt Walsh, he goes on some local news channel. And Matt Walsh, they don't know that he's Matt Walsh. They think he's a DEI expert. So they bring him in, and he's supposed to be educating them on how to be not racist. And he says, well, you do know that the studio, that where we are currently sitting, was built on some indigenous grounds or what have you. I forget exactly what he said. Rather than being questioned on this point, the two ladies who are interviewing him are just like going along with it. And oh, wow, yeah, we didn't know that. And then he literally gets them to get up out of their seat and stretch their way out of racism. And so it's very fascinating to see that because you understand that when it comes to so-called experts in the soft sciences, they're not used to being challenged. They're not used to being questioned on their nonsense. People just kind of go along with it. But Matt Walsh, whenever he's interviewing the so-called DEI and anti-racist experts, he does a thing that nobody ever does, which a good interviewer should do, which is to ask them questions and to probe and to really try to figure out what the hell it is these people are talking about. And the more questions he asks, the more you realize that these people don't have any idea what they're talking about. Speaking of the asking questions piece, another way that Walsh shines is his ability to, rather than pontificating and over-explaining, he just allows the so-called experts to speak for themselves, and in so doing, expose their own idiocy. This style works for the simple reason that it's effective. I mean, imagine a so-called DEI expert using their jargon and their mental gymnastics to explain why every white person should be on a journey to anti-racism. And on the other side, you have a conservative thinker returning the energy using hyper intellectual rhetoric to explain, well, no, white folks should not be on a road to anti-racism. For folks like me who like to nerd out, I probably wouldn't mind watching or listening to such a thing, but for the average person, it's better just to watch Matt Walsh masterfully allow these intellectuals to tie themselves in their own knot. Another thing that stuck out to me in the film is what appeared to me to be this kind of clashing of two worlds. That is, Americans who are really salt of the earth, who are average, ordinary, everyday Americans, versus the college graduate, leftist, elite liberal types, the so-called expert class. There's a disconnect between these two worlds. You see the former represented in what appeared to be a group of skaters, some black folks that he met down south, and some bikers, and they all agreed that, hey, like, who the hell cares about race? Who the hell cares about what color your skin is? Just be cool, like, just be chill. versus the hyper-intellectual types who believe that every nail is racist and thus needs to be hammered. Again, rather than going out of his way to spell it out for you, Matt Walsh just lets the people do the talking, and you can easily see the juxtaposition there. There was one moment in the film that really kind of struck a nerve for me. It actually gave me chills, and I was kind of overcome with irritation, because it really showed that we as Americans don't hold anything sacred, that everything is fluid, everything is destined for revolution. It's the old Kamala Harris adage of being unburdened by what has been. And that moment is when Matt Walsh and a friend of his is in Washington, D.C., and they are getting people to sign a petition to change the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument and painting it black. And the fact that actual American citizens were so willing and so ready to sign such a petition, it irritated me just a little bit. Now, the best scene of all is the Robin DiAngelo scene. It was hilarious, because anytime you see Robin DiAngelo in the news, especially throughout the year 2020, but even since then, she's always authoritative. And of course, the leftist mainstream media is putting her in an authoritative position to school them on how to be anti-racist, this, that, and the third. You never have seen her in the light that that Matt Walsh puts her in. He literally turns her into the student. I won't even tell you all what happened. You'll have to watch the movie to see what happened. But Matt Walsh, well done. Another hilarious scene was kind of towards the end, where Matt Walsh puts on an anti-racist workshop and people actually show up to this thing. It was hilarious. I mean, there was one point in the workshop where Matt Walsh's friend wheels his racist uncle up to the front of the classroom so he could yell at his racist uncle for something for a joke he made last Thanksgiving. And Walsh said, although I laughed at the joke, it was still racist. And he basically lets his uncle have it in front of a room full of people who are nodding in agreement. One young woman actually cusses at the racist uncle and says, "F you." Again, that portion of that scene alone is a masterful exhibition in deep and profound truths, namely the art of building a mob, building an army against a chosen enemy. So as I said, throughout the film, Walsh doesn't spend a whole lot of time over explaining or philosophizing or intellectualizing a conservative worldview. No, he just shows the idiocy of leftist ideology for what it is. He doesn't grandstand or lecture the viewing audience, but at the end of the film, he does have his kind of boy who calls out the naked emperor moment. Only he does it in the most awkward Matt Walshy way possible, and he does it in his head, which that part will make sense to you if you watch the film. Overall, I give the film a solid 8.5 out of 10. It's hilarious, it's witty, it's smart, and you will actually learn a lot. So anyway, go watch Am I a Racist? I think you'll like it. I did. Anyway, have a good day. Love you all, and God bless.